Morning, Cibolo Valley. We hope and pray all is well with you. If not, please contact us. We'd love to try and help. A lot of people will look at the Bible and say, well, there's stuff in there that just tells me that it's mythical, that it's not real. It doesn't describe anything we know of today, especially in the early parts of the Old Testament in Genesis. I'm going to give you some information today that'll show you that we can trust the Bible from the very first verse. One of those things that people question is, well, wait a minute, what about all these guys that lived 900 years or more in Genesis in the Old Testament? Certainly that was a very different time and a very different world than we live in today, because nobody lives anything like that. And some people will say, well, that by itself disproves the Bible. Adam, according to the Bible, lived to 930 years, Noah to 950. Methuselah was the oldest man in the Bible at 969. And this all sounds ridiculous. Now, what we're presented with in the Bible is that there were three distinct body forms of humanity. The first one was Adam. And Adam was born immortal. He was born with perfect DNA. He was born with the Spirit of God within him, which was lost at the fall. And he may well have had a body like that, which we will receive with Christ in the restoration. We don't know that, but we do know that it was made immortal, and that he was made such that with the Spirit within him, he could see God, because he interacted with God in the garden, and would not die as mortal men would have during the rest of the Old Testament. The second body form that's described in the Bible is after the fall. That's when Noah, Eve, Lamech, and all of these others came through, and they lived to these ridiculous amount of years of 900 years or more. But what was occurring there was they started out with perfect DNA. And over time, because of the second law of thermodynamics, everything mutates, everything degrades, everything changes. Their bodies went to a point until the amount of mutations, etc., were such that they simply wore out. But that took better than 900 years. But 1680 years later, at the time of the flood, when God said, well, things just are so screwed up, man is so evil, that we have to just start over. He started over with 8 people: Noah, his wife, his 3 sons, and their wives. And because we now have the mutations and only the genetic material that was in these 8 people, but specifically the 3 couples that were the sons of Noah, and we started over, we have there what's called a genetic bottleneck. And that genetic bottleneck starts all humanity off all over again, but in this case, not with perfect DNA, but with DNA that has what we call a genetic load. It already comes with a set of mutations which are carried forward and expanded upon generation. After this, we see a rapid degeneration in the Bible of the ages of people. Noah, who was born pre-flood, lived 950 years, but his son Shem lived only to 600 years. Shelah to 433 years. Peleg, just within 200 to 400 years after the flood, 239 years. Abraham, 175 years. Moses lived to 120. So within 16 generations, or 800 years, we see a rapid degeneration in our lifespans till we get down to where we basically are today. Our current records show that only one French woman lived to 121 in the last 250 years. Everyone else hasn't got above that 120 category. Now, Genesis 6:3, which is after the flood, tells us in the New Living Translation, "My spirit will not put up with humans for such a long time as he did when he was giving them 900 years to make up their minds whether they would follow him or not. For they are only mortal flesh. In the future, their normal lifespan will be no more than 120 years. Now, there are certain theologians that debate and say, well, that 120 is not about their lifespans, but about God deciding to bring the flood, and it was 120 years before, after he said that, before the flood came. But as I quoted before, we have a lot of data which shows that we currently have a cap on ourselves of 120 years. One of the questions is, okay, why that rapid degeneration after the flood of our lifespans? Well, a couple of interesting things about this. A guy named Dr. John C. Sanford did a computer analysis of if you have a certain amount of mutations based upon 1,680 years before the flood that are all concentrated in one set of individuals with a limited amount of DNA. And then you plot what's going to happen over the next 3,000 years, it comes out with a graph which exactly meets what happened in the Bible. The rapid degeneration down to below 120 years to our modern 70 or 80 year lifespans. Another interesting thing is Ruhr University researchers have found that our DNA is programmed to turn off. After our cells have replaced themselves 60 or 70 times, those cells are pre-programmed simply to die, to turn off, not regenerate forever, as was true with Adam's DNA. It appears that at the flood, when God said, I'm not going to strive with man for so long, he put in on-off switches. Yes, mutations are a part of our dying. Yes, a changed environment after the flood probably added to it. The genetic load that we carried forward limited us. But God prescribed that we would die at some point, that our mortality would be limited to less than 120 years and to the 70 or 80 average that we have today. This brings those early ages of 900 years that people find so believable within a context that we can believe. And again, I hope that you see that you can believe the Bible from the very first verse.